Hey, what's going on, guys? Happy Friday. Welcome back to the channel. Today, guys, we are returning to the My Favorite LJN tournament. We are currently on episode 33, so we are just shooting right through this tournament, this first round. Now, as of Thursday, I did get in from Hastel Toys, Grapplers, and Gimmicks, the most recent British Bulldog figure, so I'm not going to do the review on this figure, actually. Yeah, I'm not going to do it. I very recently I did the review of the 97 era British Bulldog along with a 2-pack of the Rougeau brothers. And this right here is the 95 era British Bulldog. And I'm also waiting on the 2-pack of Davy Boy along with wife Diana. And that is 92 era Davy Boy when he defeated Bret Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. So I might make 2 videos. I might only make 1. It depends. I might do an individual Hastel Toys review where I kind of show off those 2 packages. Or I might just make them all into 1 video because I am planning to do a review where I kind of look at all of the different British Bulldog figures. You know, it was a request or recommendation, and I'm like, you know what? Fantastic idea. And it's been one I've been really excited about making. But again, I want to wait until I actually get to get that last 2-pack from Hastel Toys before making that video. Another thing, guys, you will notice that this package is extra large. So as of maybe a week ago, I've just discovered on Ringside Collectibles, for you guys that are like me and you are mint on card collectors and you like to put all of your cards in protective cases, Ringside Collectibles does have 2-pack protective cases. So generally you go through like major wrestling figure podcasts. That's where I've gone through to buy all of my little plastic encasings, but I really don't like those. Those are one of those little flat things. You gotta kind of square them off and no, I don't like that. These right here, the same ones that you get for the individual figures that that have the little hanging tab, they hang up on the wall. What you get for the 2-pack as well. So they do fit your WWF Hasbros beautifully. They do fit your Grapplers and Gimmicks 2-packs. And there's also like a Cello Toys. Darn nose is itching me like crazy. So I did put one of my Cello Toys. There's one 2-pack that I have like of Blue Meanie and that Smirnoff guy 2-pack. Those fit beautifully in there. Now, if you're thinking that you're going to put your Zombie Sailors 2-pack in there with like Matt Cardona and Nick Gage, forget about it. It'll fit, but it'll literally take up this entire package, so you can't close it. So, I don't know why, but Zombie Sailors always has to be an individual. Everything they do, man. That's just another reason why Zombie Sailors loses a lot of credit points with me. Don't get me wrong, I still covet Zombie Sailors. I still buy all their stuff, but it's one of the reasons I don't put them as high up on the list of Hasbro style figures as some of these other companies. But I wanted to talk about that in case you guys were interested. The cases, they're not too bad. If you get them individually, they're like $5.99, so $6. If you get them, if you get 2 cases, I think you get them for like $10. So obviously, the more you buy, the better. Today's video, like I said, is the tournament video. Anything else going on this week? Not really. I guess it's just waiting on more and more figures to come in. I've got some stuff. Like I purchased a Butch Reed custom almost 2 weeks ago, and I'm still waiting for that darn figure to be shipped. There's other figures I purchased from a seller in Texas that's going on over 2 weeks that hasn't even shipped, or if it has shipped, he's still taking a sweet time going through the postal system. So I don't know what it is. I feel like over the last month or so, almost everyone that I'm buying from is like taking forever. It's another seller on eBay, Carl Masick. I want a couple of those Super Jack Specific Superstar figures, bone crunching figures, and it's almost 2 weeks. I'm still waiting on him to ship those. I'm like, if I reach out to him and be like, hey man, what's the status? I feel like he's gonna cancel the order. Plus, I'm seeing the same items listed on his account on auction right now, so I don't know if those are duplicates or if those are just the same items he's trying to resell for a better price. That's what sucks when you kind of like buy from someone you don't buy from on a regular basis, because you never know if they could have 1,000 of the same figures that they're listing for sale. I got a ton of duplicates, so I mean, just because he's selling similar items isn't cause for concern, but because he's not shipping my items, that that obviously plays into my mind and into my thought process. So, anyways, guys, let's draw the names for today's video. These names are finally dwindling down, which is awesome. First matchup, Bulldog from John Ruggiero is going to take on Tully Blanchard. Next matchup, Elizabeth will do battle against Wrestling Writers Ultimate Warrior. Well, that's kind of a one-sided affair right there. This sucks. This sucks. Okay, this doesn't suck as much as I thought it would. Never mind. Outback Jack versus Warlord. But the Warlord comes from Wrestling Writer. I thought it was Outback Jack versus Warlord Originals. Now, because that Warlord is a custom, that does help out a little bit. Just a little. But it's gotta at least balance it out, and that's not gonna make it so one-sided. Alright, next one is going to feature Ultimate Warrior Volume 2. And I don't know what the hell is that? Oh, that's Orndorff. I kind of wrote over it like 20 times, so that is Orndorff White Blue. Okay, that's a Mark Hackenberg. Orndorff White Blue from Mark Hackenberg, and he takes on Warrior Volume 2, I said. Alright. We're getting there. Alright, where was I? 8 figures to be pulled, and we will begin in a split second. Alright, so names have been drawn. And first matchup is going to feature Tully Blanchard as he does battle against the British Bulldog. So, we'll start with Tully Blanchard. When I first drew these names, I pretty much thought it was a shoo-in, hands down, British Bulldog, no doubt. In all honesty, I was not like the biggest fan of this particular figure. One thing, I really didn't grow up watching the Brainbusters or knew a whole lot of Tully Blanchard, right? Or I don't think I even knew that name at all. I think the first time I probably ever heard the name Tully Blanchard is probably at the time that this figure came out. Then I had to go back and kind of learn about him, and around 88, 89 era WWF, him and Arn Anderson. So, and of course Tully Blanchard in WCW with Ric Flair and Arn Anderson and all that. Yeah, so yeah, it makes sense. I got it. There are certain things I really like about the figure, which, namely, the design of boots. And I've always said, when you look at the way that Arn Anderson glued his boots should have been, Now, when I look at my Galoob 2 Up, I went with the black and gray, which, my mistake. I should have went with this design. But when you look at this figure, when you look at Steve Williams, these are the designs that really stand out to me, and the designs I really enjoy. It's basically a 2-up of Ric Flair. You cut off Ric Flair's head and you put on this other head. So I don't really have an image of what Tully Blanchard looks like to me. So when I look at this face, it just looks like a very generic character. When I look at LJN referees, when I look at the Ram Chargers Mike Sharp, it just looks like very generic characters. Doesn't really look like a living human being, modeled after anybody particularly. Just very generic look. Because Ric Flair Galoob is a figure that has a kid and one that I used, very predominantly among the Galoob figures. It's not a bad play pose at all. Same issues I have with this figure that I had with like a Razor Ramon. I think that this one is actually done far better because here, at least you can see said chest hair throughout, where on Razor Ramon, it's so thin. And I've always talked about like rubbing your finger on grease and kind of smearing it on the chest and calling it hair type of deal. I've never been a fan of this. But is it better than what you get from like George Steele? With like the skin lesions or skin tags on the body that represents the hair. I don't know. I think if George Steele, LJN as an example, if they actually completed the original look, which was to darken that stuff in and make it black, it would have looked like real life hair and it would have been a whole lot better. And I think something like that would have really made the figure stand out. Because here it just looks like it's like he's been rolling around in mud essentially. So when I look at like Mike Sharp and Mike or Tully Blanchard, when I look at like Razor Ramon, if the figures had no chest hair, I would never think twice about it. I could say, okay, I watched Razor Ramon growing up. He had chest hair. All right. Okay. No chest hair on the figure. That's fine. I'm not going to sit there and complain about no chest hair on the action figure, right? But because that little design was included, that's what kind of gets me. That's what stands out in my eyes. Generic or not, like I said, I think a lot of the Galoob 2-ups, I've said, and because I still can, even though it's not a Galoob, it's still the Ric Flair pose, the Ric Flair figure essentially with the replaced head. I've always said that the Galoob 2-ups is one of Random Treasure's best work. You're not changing anything. You're not changing a design or whatnot. Yeah, with Arn Anderson, you could say, okay, well, they changed the color. But you know what? You could change the color on all of them. Give any of these figures, your choice of color or design or look or features. So, that's not... I could have said, hey, I want blue trunks and blue boots. If that's what I wanted, that's what they would have done. So, it didn't really matter in that sense. It's not a bad figure at all. I used to say that this might have been on my top 5 least favorite figures. I don't know if I could say that anymore. And I've always said, certain things that I used to appreciate, I probably would not appreciate as much in the future. A lot of things that I probably didn't appreciate in the past, over time, especially with enough focus on it, enough of a review, enough time looking at it, enough time talking about it, you will start to look at certain aspects of the figure, and there are certain things about it that you're going to enjoy, and suddenly a figure that you may have felt... I never rated this figure before, but hypothetically, let's say I gave this figure a 3 out of 10. Again, I never rated it. I'm just throwing out a number. I might look at this now and be like, hey, you know what? It's not a 3 out of 10. Maybe it's a 7.5 out of 10. Maybe it's an 8 out of 10. I don't know. So suddenly a bad figure, one of your least favorites, has suddenly become a pretty freaking incredible piece. From John Ruggiero, this has always been one of my favorite figures among his work. And in all of my tournaments, this has always been a figure that has gone very far. 3 rounds. I think 3 rounds. I don't know if this figure has ever gone less than 3 rounds. I would think that a figure like this would always be a fourth rounder or more. Now, things I've enjoyed about the figure, I think adding the inclusion of an accessory is awesome, true. But it's not just the inclusion of the accessory, but the actual build-in with the accessory. So it's not just simply sitting at his feet, right? Because it's not something that you're gonna be able to hold like a weapon or some place on your head like a hat. Think about it. The chain is like a leash kind of deal. So this is awesome. That is actually built in. The overall colors and design probably made this my all-time favorite British Bulldog LJN figure. The head, even though for the longest time the head always kind of like stuck out as being less than over quality, but it was fine, man. I never really had a major issue with that. And of course, it's like what is this? A Corporal Kirchner figure. So good fighting pose, and I always enjoyed the look of the figure. Now it does kind of look like the figure is starting to crack over time. Now I could sit here and say, you know what? Aesthetics are there, name recognition is there, accessory is there. There are just so many fantastic things that I've always coveted about this particular figure that has always allowed him to go extremely far in my tournaments. I thought this was an easy toss-up. When I first read off the names, I'm like, come on. This is a wash. British Bulldog all day long. I am going to go with Tully Blanchard. For the first time ever, I think, British Bulldog will be eliminated in the first round. And I have to go back to my notes and see in previous tournaments when he was eliminated, but I never remember him getting eliminated this early. I could be wrong. He could have been eliminated first, second time go in Peeper's turn, but I don't think so. I think he was always a fourth rounder. But I think Tully Blanchard, I'm getting a lot more appreciation from this figure now than I think I've given him credit for in the past. So I think he's a deserving figure to move on to the second round. Now, when I talk about absolute washes, yeah, this is an absolute wash. We'll start with Elizabeth. One thing you'll hear me say time and time again, Elizabeth, she is a Barbie doll after all. Yes, slick. He's a very tiny figure. Small head, small hands, just small stature overall. Very tiny figure. Not a playable wrestling figure at all. He is simply, you can't really use Slick as an example as anything other than manager. Elizabeth, basically the same thing. But kind of looking at this, if you had maybe a Jax Pacific or something of similar size, you could potentially use her as a wrestler if you wanted to. Elizabeth, technically, yes. This figure would deserve to be in the top 10 worst LJNs based on the fact that it's not an actual wrestling figure. It's, again, I classify this as nothing more than a Barbie doll. But what do I always say? Whenever I give my top 10 worst LJNs ever, Elizabeth is nowhere to be found. Now, if I were to sit down, lay out all 72 figures or however many LJNs there are, and put them in order of, likability or how much I covet them, Big John Studd, number one. Hogan, number two. Series 1 Andre, number three. The Kamala, number four, etc., right? And went down the list. Yeah, this figure would probably end up somewhere around 60, 65, or somewhere around there, right? And let's say there's 72 figures. So 65, that would mean that she would come in at what? 60 at number 8 as the number 8 worst LJN. But if I were to do my top 10, she would not be on the list, oddly enough. So it's weird that I look at it like that. It's a fine figure. And it's kind of funny. Like I've always said, figures, when you're bidding on them, they're always super freaking crazy expensive. When you're selling them, they sell for pennies, and it's infuriating. Every time I bought an Elizabeth, or tried to buy an Elizabeth, and it's like, well, I got an Elizabeth, so now I need Elizabeth because I want to put the gold skirt on her. Now I got a purple skirt. Now I want to buy another Elizabeth, put the purple skirt on her, right? So, etc. And when you're buying these figures, or hey, I got a Macho Man, I want to put Elizabeth with him so I can sell them as a bundle type of deal. Come up with different ideas of how to sell figures, right? To try and maximize your sales. Or you want to buy an Elizabeth because you're getting all of the LJNs that come with accessories, and you want to put them all in one bundle type of deal. Elizabeth without skirt by itself, you're looking at $40 to $60. But when you're trying to sell Elizabeth by herself, and let's say you're putting it on auction, you're lucky to get $20 for it. And I'm like, why? Why does that happen? Nuts. Elizabeth ain't a bad figure, but come on. When I talk about absolute washes, so in the very first My Favorite LJN tournament, as you guys remember, I didn't separate based on fighting pose. So, original Ultimate Warrior would have faced any other Ultimate Warrior that I had. That included any custom Ultimate Warrior that had an alternate fighting pose. My Hercules. You have original Roman Emperor type of Hercules from LJN, but then you got the Hercules with the Billy Jack Haynes fighting pose. You got the Hercules with the what was the other one I have? With the resin figure that was like so, right? On all three of those figures, different poses, but they all went up against each other in the first tournament because it was about putting the same character against each other in the first round. In the second tournament, I was still doing the same thing. I was still going by the way that the figures were situated on the shelf, but the only time that same characters were going to square off against each other is if they had the same fighting pose. So a Series 6 Ultimate Warrior would only face his customs with the exact Series 6 Ultimate Warrior fighting pose. So this ended up being his own Ultimate Warrior. So it gave Ultimate Warrior character multiple opportunities to win the tournament. Now, this tournament, I said, forget all that. We're doing a random drawing. We're eliminating customs going against originals. We're letting every single figure be their own. So if I have 25 different Roddy Pipers, guess what? 25 Roddy Pipers have a chance of winning the tournament. Because they're all going to have the opportunity to go against other members of the tournament, right? First tournament. I forgot where this one placed, but I know he was a semifinalist. Or maybe did he make it to the finals? No, he was a semifinalist, I believe. So, and he barely, like, by the skin of his teeth type of deal, missed making the finals. When I talk about legitimate figures with the opportunity to win this tournament. He could have won the first one. He could have won the second one. But there's just something about a particular figure that may have just put him over the edge to beat him in the previous. But it doesn't mean that they're going to beat him again, right? If that same opportunity presents itself. And both this one and Ram Treasures is in this. And I don't know why this keeps happening. I keep saying it in all my videos. I keep feeling like in all of my videos, I keep drawing the exact same names. So you keep getting multiple Andre the Giants in the same video. You keep getting multiple Brutus Beefcakes or multiple Roddy Pipers, multiple Ultimate Warriors, multiple Hulk Hogans, etc. It's like weird that it keeps playing out like this. I actually commissioned Eric to make me another Ultimate Warrior just like this one, but with a different paint scheme. Because this is one of my all-time favorite figures. Hands down. The face paint was amazing. The head sculpt with the hair. This has got to be one of my favorite hairdos of the entire collection. Hulk Hogan already has the most perfect pose, right? I mean, the boots. The detail of the boots. When I talked about when I did my review of Ram Treasure's Berserker figure, and I talked about my favorite figures with the awesome boots. Yes, Bruiser Brody is on that list of awesome boots, but this particular Ultimate Warrior has easily, if not the single greatest boots of any of the customs. This is an absolute wash, and yes, I do expect this Ultimate Warrior, forget 3 rounds, 4 rounds. If this guy isn't in the semifinals again, I would be highly disappointed. So, I didn't feel like pulling my Outback Jack off of my main display, so I just pulled a spare figure. So this is going to feature Warlord as he does battle against Outback Jack. Now this original battle was really angering me because I thought it was original Outback Jack against original Warlord. And I'm like, man, first off, it sucks when two absolutely amazing top 12, let's say, original LJNs go against each other. Now, finding out that one of them was a custom, I'm like, okay, yeah, that helps. And this is what I talked about, I think, in the last video with the Paul Orndorff. I'm like, there are so many figures that get customized using a Paul Orndorff figure. Rick Rude always seems to be like the most commonly used figure, and with the abs and everything, it makes sense. I mean, that is to me a more of a Rick Rude type body. But Warlord, yeah, I have seen not just mine, but I've seen other people customize Warlord using that as well. Not so much Barbarian though. The head sculpt with paint, beard, the dual color hair and everything. The head is absolutely amazing. Now, I know that the Series 1 Hulk Hogan that I bought from Andrew Sable, Move Over Swanson on eBay, where he had like the blue trunks and blue boots, blue knee pads, and he had his chest was painted white. I think it said like Made in America or something. I know that was the very first custom figure I ever bought. But from Wrestling Writer, the first figure I ever bought from him was a Terry Funk figure. And after that, I started getting pretty much all of my customs from him. Terry Funk, of course, was original. And one of the big purchases I made was just before I went on my last deployment to Iraq. And I got, part of that lot was an original Fuji. It came with Kane. But part of that lot also included that Ultimate Warrior we just saw, Powers of Pain, both Barbarian and Warlord, and I think Mr. Perfect was also the resin Mr. Perfect with like kind of like the Hogan type pose as well. I think that one was also part of that bundle. And then while I was in the hotel, going through doing my training just before we went on deployment. I also bought that special Bret Hart with the jacket, which we haven't seen yet, but that one was part of it, and the Rick Rude with pink pants and this body. So, and among a million other customs I bought from him over the last couple of years. But so this one was actually done really well. I've said that if I went back in time, there's certain figures I would not buy from Eric. Like I wouldn't buy that Ric Flair because that one was just really bad. I said I probably wouldn't go back and buy the Powers of Pain. But realistically, I think Barbarian, like so, is probably the only one I wouldn't. The Warlord, because of this particular pose, I probably wouldn't. But the head sculpt, like I said, looks pretty spectacular. And this was at a time when I actually really liked his work. And, it's gone down a little bit. A lot of it. But this was solid work at one point. Outback Jack. Now, again, this is a secondary figure. This isn't from my main display, so he's got he's beat up pretty bad. That's alright. Outback Jack has got to be, like I said, on the top. He's not in my top 10. He's definitely on my top 15, maybe top 12 favorite original LJN figures. He's got a fantastic aesthetic look. Awesome accessory. Of course, during the height of Paul Hogan and his Crocodile Dundee movies in the mid to late 80s, that's where this whole getup comes from. Okay, awesome. I think you could have built on that a whole lot more. I don't think Outback Jack, again, I've never heard of Outback Jack, not until I started collecting LJNs. And you know what? When it comes to a lot of these wrestlers from the 80s, I would say probably half of the figures you get from LJN, I've never heard the names of any of them until I started collecting LJN, so that's not uncommon. Even though I consider this to be more of like a one-armed wrestling figure, I've always said, if you got at least one good arm, and it kind of reminds me of that new special Macho Man figure. One good arm out, yeah, the other arm's up, but it makes it a very solid playable figure. And one of the more go-to enjoyable figures, I would say. Fantastic overall look. And it's kind of got that same thing that you get from with George Steele. I call them skin tags. That's supposed to mimic hair, right? But you could have filled that in black and made it real hair. Otherwise, it just looks like, like you spilt hot coffee or hot water and scorched his chest and gave him a damn Freddy Krueger burn or something. But this is a fantastic piece. The Warlord figure has an unbelievable paint job. I choose play pose over paint. I mean, paint is the number 2 most important thing to me. The color and design. Warlord, I think, was I want to say 89 Royal Rumble. And this is what kills me. Warlord is a superstar. At least in my opinion, he's a superstar, right? And when you got someone of his caliber coming into a Royal Rumble, and you're in there for a half a freaking second, and you're clotheslined over the ropes by Hulk Hogan, and I hate that. You see that all the time with the Bushwhackers. Luke walks in, someone grabs him by the back of the head. Here, let me escort you to the other side of the ring. Throw you over the ropes. 4 seconds later, you're out. Shawn Michaels jumps in. Hits the Ultimate Warrior. Ultimate Warrior's like I mean, come on. I hate that. Any Royal Rumble participant, if you're in the Rumble for less than 5 minutes, you have just completely obliterated and just ruined that Royal Rumble. That is a waste of a roster spot. I love the Royal Rumble tournament. It is by far my favorite matchup. I don't care about these single matches or these Survivor Series matches most of the time. Some Survivor Series matches are good. But Royal Rumbles, I will gravitate towards a Royal Rumble every time. But that stuff right there makes it incredibly boring. Guys throwing everybody out and they stand in the ring by themselves for 15 minutes because everybody that comes in is immediately tossed over. That's boring. I want a competitive match. And for Warlord, that was disappointing. I would like to actually go back and watch. I always say I'd like to go back and watch these matches, but I just never seem to find the time to do so. But for me, Outback Jack, really easy answer. Definitely. He will move on to round 2. Last matchup is going to feature another Mark Hackenberg custom of Paul Orndorff as he does battle against the Ultimate Warrior Volume 2 from Ram Treasures. So, like I said, I got a few different of these customs from Mark, and they're basically roughly the same figures. White, where he's going to have red, or red down the boots, or it's going to be black, or black down the boots, and then this one's blue. So, these figures, I mean, they're Paul Orndorff. Paul Orndorff is not a very expensive figure, so it didn't really cost me a fortune to get these figures. And a lot of time, and I didn't have a lot of Paul Orndorff customs. So that's another thing I've mentioned before. If I don't have a ton of customs for a particular character, yeah, it's easy for me to pick up customs for that particular character. It's a simple design, but you know what? It's different. A simple color scheme. You take the Paul Orndorff original figure, all red. Okay? Change it to all white. Simple change. Makes it a completely different figure. So, yeah, I bought all 3 figures because it might be simple changes of colors here and there. Just one, you're changing it from, all you're doing is changing stripes or changing the lettering, the color of the line, but you know what, that's fine. It was enough of a change for me to really desire the figures, and they were nice pickups. Now, something like the Paul Orndorff that I got from Mercari, where they used a Hulk Hogan Series 1 body, yes, I got it. That is obviously more preferential because it's a freaking Hulk Hogan Series 1 body. Hulk Hogan already has the most perfect pose. I do have a lot of these Paul Orndorff bodies for other customs, as I've described. We've seen the Warlord, but that's fine, man. It was just nice to get. You're doing business with someone who you really respect and who does amazing artwork and who's an amazing customizer. So why not? I kind of feel the same way when I buy from Ram Treasures, right? You think I love every single Ram Treasures figure I buy? No. But even the figures that I look at, I'm like, you know what, this one isn't for me. I still go and I buy it because, in one part, yes, I do want to keep the collection complete. So that's a reason. Another reason is, yes, the folks at Ram Treasures have been amazing. They provided me great service. They're awesome to talk to and do business with. And you know what? You're supporting a small business, so why not? There's worse things to do with your money. So if it helps keep them doing what they're doing and helps them buy other modes and helps them create other figures, other characters, and keeps bringing in more fans. So I'm all for that. If I could play my role, sure. The Ultimate Warrior figure from Ram Treasures, I to this day I still say this is one of their top 4, top 5 figures. But even though I've always loved the figure, I've always had problems with it at the same time, and I've always said my biggest issue, and it's not so much an issue with the figure itself. It's just an issue with character selection, I guess. And that's mostly centered around the fact that there's already LJN Ultimate Warrior. So there was no need for another LJN Ultimate Warrior. That's basically it in a nutshell. And I really like the original LJN Ultimate Warrior. Like I said, I think it's a superior figure, because when I look at this, it's basically Warlord, right? And I think Series 6 Ultimate Warrior is a better figure than Warlord. So in that case, that by comparison, it makes it better than this. One thing I would have done differently if I had actually paid attention is I would have actually changed the color scheme on this so that I didn't get the exact same figure over and over again, right? And I mean, this right here, this is like the Series 1 Hasbro Ultimate Warrior, right? So it's a look I'm very familiar with. But there are a lot of things. I mean, that the paint, I think, looks a little bit better, obviously, on the face. The hair, I think the hair blends. I mean, I like the fullness of that hair more, but I think it blends more genuinely with this head mold. The head is obviously a lot smaller, though. That's kind of a downgrade. Play pose, obviously, I prefer that one with the Hulk Hogan compared to the Warlord. And then, the folks in Ram Chargers, they make upgrades, such as including the tassels, or by putting the little warrior symbols on the knee pads. But even the boots are absolutely splendid, right? So, this is another figure that, in theory, is a 5th round figure. Does Ultimate Warrior win the tournament? And here's the thing. During the My Favorite Ram Treasures tournament, he didn't win the tournament. He didn't win that tournament. So, if it comes down to a Random Treasures figure that might win this tournament, there's one particular character, one particular figure that I have in mind that I feel like has a bona fide chance of winning. But it's not going to be your Dusty Rhodes. It's not going to be your Ultimate Warrior or your Barbarian or your Mr. T. Even though, yes, they all have absolute 100% positive chances of winning. Thing is, different in this tournament compared to others, you don't have them going side by side. With Ram drawing, I could say, I could say Paul Orndorff here is better than this Warrior. But next matchup, I could say this here is better than this, right? But what if I were to say that this one was better than this one? So, it really depends on who is facing who. But Ultimate Warrior defeats Paul Orndorff. To me, again, another very easy selection. So, that does conclude the video, and I believe this was 33. Yep, round 1, part 33. So, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, goodbye, everybody.